Hey, do you remember during the pandemic when they said that the technology used for vaccine passports would never be normalised and utilised in ordinary situations to become part of a social credit score system where everyone would have a digital ID and CBDCs would become normalised? Well, guess what? That was a lie. It is happening. The mainstream media are not your friends. They want you dumb, dead and in chains. And what we are addressing is the introduction of digital IDs and central banking digital currencies. Both things that, I don't know, needn't necessarily be awful, but you can bet your ass they will be. We'll get into this in more detail. Let's go. Last month, The Times reported that governments globally are on the precipice of major adoption of digital ID. The European Union is preparing for the 2024 release of its digital ID wallet, which would enable EU residents to store digital identity credentials such as national ID, driving licence and bank account details. Let's have a look at them announcing this plan to turn us all into data and manageable, little, humorless, faceless, libidoless drones.
Und aus diesem Grund wird die Kommission demnächst eine sichere europäische digitale Identität vorschlagen. Eine, der wir vertrauen und die Bürgerinnen und Bürger überall in Europa nutzen können,
You can do anything, as long as we permit it, as long as there's not some lockdown, as long as you've never thought or believed anything that we don't agree with. So technology is, of course, not necessarily bad. It's simply a tool. What we're concerned about is the ongoing centralisation of data and the ability of unelected bodies like the European Union or various international organisations that implement controls. We've seen this happen in the last couple of years, having the ability to correlate data and through this concrescence of national power and global data create states that are beneficial to their agenda. We've seen it already in the last couple of years. We've seen it piloted. Don't have to be a conspiracy theory, but certain sets of interests have benefited from various crises over the last couple of years and perhaps for a lot longer than that. The pandemic was hugely profitable to the wealthiest people in the world. The data is available for that. Big tech benefited, governments benefited through their ability to regulate, the pharmaceutical industry benefited. If it's a conspiracy theory, you shouldn't be able to call up data and demonstrate that it's 100% true. So do you think this technology that will be in the same hands, the same sets of interest, is going to be ultimately beneficial to you for convenience, for safety, the two cudgels that are used to bludgeon you into compliance? Do you think that this is going to mean that we're so safe and everything's so convenient that it's barely worth getting up out of bed? Why don't you just stick a tube down my neck, fill me full of glucose and I'll wait for the grave?
alles zu tun. Vom Steuerzahlen bis zum Fahrradmieten.
There you are, as usual, it's presented as convenient and amenable. And there's no doubt that having like a sort of a phone that can do all sorts of fancy stuff and being able to get into venues and all those things, they are convenient to be able to pay for travel. And all of these things are convenient. But what if the wind changes? What if there are a new set of circumstances? What if there are new climate curfews, new virus lockdowns, a new government altogether that just simply decides to change things? Once you start implementing this technology, you have to have the kind of naive faith and trust that like either a lamb or an idiot would place into organisations and institutions that have not been behaving in a particularly benevolent fashion over the last few years. The EU has picked its partners in developing the bloc's controversial digital ID wallet, and one of them is the same company that previously worked to develop the UK's official COVID pass and tracing app, Luxembourg-based net company Intrasoft. Intrasoft. It's all interwoven and it's all nice and soft. Nothing to worry about there. Every government that introduced the vaccine certification vowed that no personal information will be held beyond its necessity. That's what you would say. But governments were far from unanimous on how long and by whom our intimate information will be held, owned or overseen. Along with IBM, the designer, state bureaucrats were exploring how the platform could be retrofitted to verify other types of records and credentials, according to Vox. Once biodata are collected and filed, cautioned Hamid Khan of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, there's no delete button. In a sense, does this remind you of when Edward Snowden's revelations were made, that we just didn't have an understanding of the degree to which we could be tracked, how much of our data was being captured, who had access to it? Does this not make you think also of the recent revelations of the amount of CIA and FBI involvement in platforms like Twitter and other platforms also, that there's just a interconnected symbiotic relationship between big tech platforms and the government, and that there's a shared agenda to accrue information? The acquisition of data is extremely powerful. Ultimately, they believe that we are data, that we're nothing more than information, that we can be observed and tracked, and obviously, once it gets to CBDCs, centralized currencies, that are digital, controlled. Not long ago, in order to counter a genuine radical movement of ordinary people, they would have to have the army on the streets. Now people can just be shut down with a button. Your ability to transact could be shut down easily and simply. I don't have that much trust in anyone in the world, let alone the organisations that we're granting it to. When biometric data, bodily attributes digitized, are married to surveillance technology, both the potential for profit and the ambitions of the techno-futurists inflate without limit. The British tech firm Onfido envisions a seamless EU-wide identity verification, or IDV system, for online gambling, telemedicine, car rentals, electronic voting and more. In 2020, Onfido called its immunity passport in development the linchpin of a new normality in a post-COVID-19 society. As is often the case, these matters are not only conspiratorial, not only are they not conjecture, the very organisations that are involved are explicitly telling you what the plan is. They're overtly saying, this is what we're going to do. And then if you counter with a question like, couldn't that be misused under certain circumstances, even your inquiry is regarded as a kind of hysteria. But how can it be hysterical if you've been alive for the last couple of years? If you're witnessing the advancing censorship on social media platforms and in mainstream media, the growing power and wealth of these big tech organisations. This year, the company's chief privacy officer told Biometric Update that proven immunity to the virus de jure might become a basic permission attribute. A Swedish company has introduced a vaccine certification microchip that can be implanted under the skin. This is one of those times where you can just step back and look at all of the various nodes of progression and how they might coalesce to create digital tyranny. Meanwhile, in India, India's Income Tax Administration has warned citizens that they should link their permanent account numbers, or PANs, to their Aadhaar biometric identification numbers before April the 1st, 2023, or risk their PAN becoming non-operational. So there we are. So it's not even a projection. It's an observation of what's happening presently. And of course, you'll be very familiar with the example of the Canadian truckers and people that donated having their bank accounts frozen. So already this technology is used. In India, PAN is required to perform multiple financial activities like creating bank accounts, depositing money, trading stocks, and buying or selling real estate. Throughout history, marginal communities that exist outside of the system have been condemned. Even in countries like mine, Britain, people that are travellers are regarded with suspicion, cynicism, and often outright racism because they simply live outside of our models of taxation and finance. I've just gone, hey, what if we could just live differently? And that's regarded as, how dare you try and live differently? So, this brings us to central banking digital currencies. Governments and financial institutions are increasingly warming to the idea of introducing central bank digital currencies. I like this idea that we could switch off the money tap. In April 2021, Rishi Sunak launched a task force on Bank of England digital currency. With the decline in the use of cash, which has been managed, and the increased prominence of cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, there has been heightened interest among policymakers about the viability of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Let's have a look at Rishi Sunak, bold as brass, WEF, Goldman Sachs, leader of our country if you're in the UK, telling us what we've got to look forward to.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency...
He's always in that mood, Rishi Sunak. Sorry that I was at those parties all the while you were locked up during lockdown. That's the mood he's in. Hello. Just like a smiling puppet, which is weird because he's an autonomous being who's democratically elected. Oh no, he wasn't democratically elected.
The group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money.
You idiot.
A bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins.
For a while, till we stop banknotes and coins, and then we can control you even more.
Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK.
It's all fine. It's all gonna be fine.
And governments and central banks across the world are working together,
Sort of like they're coordinated or conspiring to do it.
looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice.
I've got an idea what it might mean in practice.
This includes issues that people care about, such as ensuring users' money would be safe and secure,
It's gotta be safe. It's gotta be secure.
would be energy efficient,
Oh, it's gotta be but thank God. I mean, I was worried, like, the environment.
and available to everyone.
Yeah, it's got to be everyone, like the poor, the desperate, the maligned, the outsiders, and people, for example, that virulently oppose your centralised systems. They shouldn't be excluded either.
A potential CBDC could offer businesses and consumers new ways to pay in the future.
Businesses and consumers. And what's outside of that? Nothing.
It's all part of the wider story of digital innovation that has delivered benefits to millions around the world and in the UK.
Benefits! What if you're on benefits? Then you're fucked. In 2021, the Bank of England called on ministers to decide whether a central banking digital currency should be programmable, ultimately giving the issuer control over how it is spent by the recipient. Tom Mutton, a director at the Bank of England, said there could be some socially beneficial outcomes from that, preventing activity which is seen to be socially harmful in some way. Depending on the mood of the day, we could just shut down any dissidents or anyone who argues or we don't like the look of. You could think of giving your children pocket money but programming the money so that it couldn't be used for sweets. Have you noticed how they talk to us like we're idiot children continually, whether it's Rishi Sunak's kindly blank stare or the metaphors and analogies that they use to help us understand how the relentless advance of a centralised new world order will be sort of beneficial for us? You're like some children, okay, and you want some sweets, I suppose. Well, yeah, because I'm a child, I don't want anything else. Well, you can't have no fucking sweets. Or, for example, freedom, or the right to dissent, or to believe what you want to believe, or live a lifestyle that we haven't sanctioned. All of that. Beep. No sherbet for you, sonny boy. There is a whole range of things that money could do, programmable money, which we cannot do with the current technology. Yeah, once money's out there, people could do whatever they like, almost as if they're free. But once it's programmable money, they could do what we like, almost as if they're not free. And it's as simple as that. In spite of condemning China when it's convenient, many of our so-called democracies openly admire China and emulate them when possible. So what's going on over there? China is exploring expiration dates with its upcoming digital yuan, or DCEP, which means the currency will expire if not used in a certain time frame. So I guess they can switch off your money if you don't use it how they want you to. Let's have a look.
China is exploring expiration dates with its upcoming digital yuan, or DCEP, which means the currency will expire if not used in a certain time frame. The digital yuan is programmable to the point that the currency can be made to expire, thus forcing consumers to use it up by a certain date.
Forcing consumers. Once the technology exists to sort of shut down, devalue or prevent money from being spent, it's pretty easy to see how that same technology might be used to control undesirable activity or undesirable people. And with more and more protest laws being introduced and more censorship laws and more control of what they call misinformation and disinformation, if you add to that the ability to control currency, it's pretty easy to see how social credit score type systems, control of currency could lead to a situation where you're essentially in an open prison, where you're essentially a slave, where you will have freedom, but that freedom is so prescriptive that it's not really freedom at all, is it? Once they can observe your health data, your financial habits, your spending habits, your medical situation, censor you to within an inch of your life and shut off your finances at the push of a button, what kind of freedom is really left?
If domestic consumption can be tightly controlled, then it's a way to not just increase the volume of consumption but to control the variance of demand for the goods China produces.
Even though this is rather a nice presentation, just notice the words like force and tightly controlled. That's what it comes down to. When this is presented to you, it will be as convenient and safe and preventing fraud and fighting crime, and you'll be an inch taller and it's going to be great on your wedding day and all sorts of stuff. But in effect, they don't do things unless it gives them more power or it gives their corporate partners more ability to profit. Those are the only motivations you will ever see play out. Just look at any news story in the world, basically, and you can see that playing out. That's why I'm always suspicious when they say, this is because human life is sacred, or because we want to protect this marginalised group. You think, that doesn't seem to be how you behave generally, so why are you doing it this time? Because there's money in it.
The digital yuan permits a new method for surveilling the population.
Also good. It's good that you can surveil them, their spending habits, and stop them spending if they're naughty.
Creating new data which can be tracked by authorities.
I mean, what about this is good news for you and your family? Creating new data that can be tracked by authorities. Whichever way you look at it, it's less power for you, more power for them. But looking at today's presentation, it's pretty clear that whether it's social credit scoring or digital IDs or CBDCs, ultimately, in the wrong hands, this will diminish your power and increase their power.